The Shinigami Eyes were an ability that Shinigami offered to Death Note wielders, which involves giving up half of your lifespan for a new set of eyes. These eyes are able to see the true name and lifespan of humans. Ryuk offered these eyes to Light way back in early Death Note, but he refused due to his ego, as well as not wanting to give up half of his life. But what if Light swallowed his pride and took the eyes? How does the series change from that point on? Before we get into the what if, we need to establish how much time Light would have had if he had made the eye deal, and what point in time Light would get the eyes in this what if. The average life expectancy in Japan during 2002 was 81, and half of 81 is 40.5. Hypothetically speaking, Light would have 40.5 years left, which is actually a decent amount of time, as by the start of the series he was 17 and ends the series at 23. So retrospectively looking at it, Light low-key messed up, like 23 years old dying, like he could have had 40 years just to, I don't know, fly around like a girl. As for what point in time Light gets the eyes, we'll go over 3 scenarios. The first scenario will be Light getting the Shinigami Eyes right at the start, the second will be post episode 9, and the third and final scenario will be during part 2 of Death Note. With that out of the way, let's get into the what if. In this scenario, Light accepts the Shinigami deal right from the start, assuming Ryuk tells him about the deal much earlier on than he did in canon. So pre-episode 3, pretty much, if you want to put it that way. This leads to Light's plans slightly differing, but not as much as you think. The only real difference is that the Shinigami Eyes are now involved in the plan. Light's arrogance would also be at an all-time high. With the power of the Death Note and the Shinigami Eyes, he'd believe himself to be untouchable, and would move far more recklessly than he did in canon. Nonetheless, this still leads L to deduce that Kira only needs a face to kill, which would make him far more cautious than he did in canon. As things progress, Light would still use Ray Penba to kill all the FBI agents, rather than single out Ray. If he were to just kill Ray, it would essentially be giving himself away in the eyes of L and the task force. Things would play out the same until episode 8, and as we know in canon, after Light is cleared of suspicion, L decides to take a risk by meeting up with Light in person, exposing himself as L to see how Light would react. Due to L's early deduction of Kira only needing a face to kill, the university enrollment strat doesn't really work, and L would likely replace this plan with a plan involving another decoy similar to the one on TV, but in real life this time, kind of like what Light considered in the canon, like if there's another decoy or something, to learn about how Kira kills. So L will send a decoy. However, the major turning point is Misa's arrival. The only reason why Light spares Misa is because he acknowledges her usefulness. Specifically, the fact that she made the Shinigami Eye deal. This means that Misa's potential for killing is actually greater than Light's, who's limited to only the Death Note. Light planned to dispose of Misa after using her to figure out L's real name, but in this scenario, he has no use for her whatsoever. Upon meeting her, he would use the opportunity to learn as much as he can about her before setting up an ideal date and time to kill her without the police finding out. Now, this would go one of 2 ways, so pay attention. Option A, Rem kills Light in retaliation for killing Misa. Option B, Light gains a second notebook and a potential helper. Many would assume that option A is the more likely of the 2, as Rem has made it clear that if Light were to ever hurt Misa or fail to save her, Rem would end up writing his name in the notebook. However, many fans tend to overlook Rule 34 of the notebook, which is revealed in chapter 48 of Death Note, and it states, "Only a god of death that has passed on their death note to a human is able to kill the owner of the death note." This rule was written in the original Shinigami notebook, and neither Light or Ryuk knew about this rule. Or alternatively, Ryuk knew but didn't want to tell Light to make things more exciting. So when Rem threatens to kill Light, it's actually all a bluff. But why did Light still agree to help Misa if Rem couldn't kill him? Well, as I just said, Light was unaware of this rule. But even if he knew, he still would have had to help Misa, as her incarceration would negatively affect him and his plans for the new world later down the line. He had no choice but to save Misa so that things could go according to plan. Nonetheless, Rem only had 2 opportunities to kill Light, but in those same instances, she wasn't in a good position to kill Light. The first opportunity was when Misa gave up ownership of the notebook while it's in confinement thanks to L, and Rem would go on to give Misa's notebook to Light. Rem couldn't kill Light because she needed his intelligence to come up with a plan to free Misa, but still threatens him in order to have him comply. And she could have actually carried out this threat, but again it would be totally disadvantageous. The second opportunity for Rem to kill Light was after the Yotsuba arc specifically around the time when Light regains his memories and has to kill Higuchi with a slip of the notebook. The notebook that Light held onto was none other than Ram's, and if she wanted to, she could have killed him here. However, that would be stupid. Light was still carrying out the final pieces of his plan, and Ram genuinely believed that Light was trying to save Misa, which he was, but only to further his own goals that he kept hidden. By the time Ram realizes that Light created this plan to corner Ram and directly manipulate her into killing L, it's too late. If Ram doesn't kill L, Misa gets arrested and gains the death penalty, as L would figure out that the 13-day rule was fake. She can save Misa by killing L and Wataru, but that would expand Misa's lifespan beyond its natural limit, which would lead to Rem's death. But Rem still chose this option. So, to summarize, option A is impossible. Rem wouldn't be able to kill Light even if she wanted to. Option B is up in the air though, as Rem would technically have no reason to help Light unless you believe Rem is susceptible to changing her opinion on Light, which did happen in canon. During the few months she spent with Higuchi, she experienced true human greed and came to understand why Light wanted to change the world. As with Misa, Rem actually gained feelings for Light and supported him, and even at the time of her death, harbored no hate towards Light. Misa was safe, and Rem respected Light for surpassing her status as a Shinigami due to his masterful plan. It's possible that Rem would wander the earth for a while and realize why Light did what he did, but it's not really guaranteed. So for the sake of the video, we'll just say that neither happens. However, problems would immediately start up again for Light. He'd essentially be stuck in a stalemate with L. Light has no way to get close to L because he never makes contact with him, and it's highly unlikely that L would risk meeting Light face to face unless he could be 100% sure that he wouldn't die. Maybe L could meet Light with the other task force members and inform them beforehand that if he dies within the following days, Light is Kira, but at best that only makes them heavily suspicious. There's no direct proof to actually convict Light other than a genius's word and intuition. But at the same time, it would make most of the task force members highly suspicious of Light. Either way, Light has no way to get close to L unless L permits it, which is why I say the battle between Light and L would be in a stalemate. L has no proof to convict Light, and Light can't get close to L in order to kill him. The only way that L beats Light is if he makes a mistake that's so reckless it just blows up his entire Kira scheme and exposes him to the task force. But that's not too likely. Light is arrogant, sure, but he acknowledges L as a rival. He wouldn't underestimate L like he did with Niramello. However, it is possible for Light to get close to L, but it depends on how much he's willing to sacrifice. Light could hypothetically enact the memory loss plan, which involves him giving up ownership of the notebook and having Ryuk give it to someone who lusts for power, which then leads to Light and L teaming up to recover it. This would likely be the only way that Light could get close to L, as L would have no choice but to acknowledge that Light is in Kira right at this moment due to the killings going on while surveillance is on him. However, if Light gives up the notebook, this means that he loses the Shinigami Eyes and would have to make the deal again, which leads to him having to half his lifespan again. As previously established, half of 81 is 40.5, and half of 40.5 is basically 20. Literally chopping off 3 more years than he did originally in canon, which only gives Light a few more years to live, meaning that he's cooked. Light would have to come up with an entirely different plan that somehow allows him to get the notebook and the eyes, while it's also getting close enough to L to where he can kill him and get away with it. Either way, scenario 1 either ends in a stalemate until Light messes up, or Light sacrifices even more of his lifespan to kill L. But what about scenario 2? Everything in the series remains the same until post episode 9, which involves L making contact with Light. At this point, it's actually game over for L. And the moment he confirms his identity is the moment that he signs his death warrant. Light would go on to meet L many times after that, specifically during the tennis match and the deduction test in the cafe. But it wouldn't even go that far. After L tells Light who he is, he makes the ideal and sets up a plan to kill L. He'd limit his contact with L in order to avoid suspicion, but at the same time, he'd need to carefully plan out L's death and make it into an accident or a suicide, which is a reason that's conceivable enough to sound logical. L's death is unavoidable in this scenario as he has no way of logically deducing that Light has the eyes. Light would space out L's death sometime after their first meeting, as killing him immediately after they encounter each other is very suspicious, obviously. The task force would be stumped upon the revelation that L has died, and they are absolutely cooked. L would have never made the deduction that Kira can kill with just a face, because L wouldn't even see his own death coming. The task force aren't smart enough to deduce this either, so the Kira case goes cold. Light continues on with his life until Niramello are thrown into the equation. I'll expand more on this matchup in scenario 3, but it again goes one of two ways. If Light underestimates Nir and Mello due to how easily way he beat L, it may lead to them pulling a victory against him as they did in canon, just with much more difficulty due to Light's skill set. However, if Light doesn't underestimate Nier and Mello and takes them seriously, it's game over for them. Regardless, it's more likely that Light would initially underestimate Nier and Mello, but as he did in canon, realizes how much of a threat they are and uses his paranoia of Nier to motivate him into acting quickly to get rid of him, eventually doing so with the usage of the eyes. But if you disagree with that conclusion, then Nier and Mello beat Light due to how sloppy he was moving in part 2. Now, for scenario 3, it involves Light getting the Shinigami Eyes after L's death, but it depends on when he gains these eyes specifically. Light did respect L as an opponent, and in this hypothetical, it's plausible that he gained the eyes due to wanting to be better prepared for the next person that challenges him, with this being Nier. The other scenario involves Light gaining the eyes after he has the conversation with Nier, but either scenario ends in Light's overall victory. He would have never exposed himself to Mello and would be able to kill him upon his base getting raided, and Nier would just be as clueless as Mello. Light could have manipulated the President of the United States into giving him a photo or surveillance footage of Nier from his headquarters, which leads to Nier and the rest of the SBK getting wiped out. So to conclude this what if, it's most optimal for Light to get the eyes post episode 9 or right after L's death. The earlier he gets them, the more screwed he is, and the later he gets them, the more better of a position he's in.